breaking her body, drunk at their party, boys being rowdy. My hair's really cloudy. It was like 100 years ago, more like a year or so. Really don't remember though. See, we should just let it go, but they burned down our nations. Don't feel the pain that we facing, locked in their basement, just trying to make it so much better then, so much better when we were alone and we seated our own. So much better then, so much better when you sing with sages and I pen the pages. So much better then, so much better when we mending the minds and we bring back the shine.
That good old boy behavior. Never thought we would make it, even when put blood on the wager. Heaven is a mile away, but a little too far to save it. They said, prayed on a downfall, even when they got the devil as a neighbor. A neighbor? It's a neighbor. Or maybe it was just a ghost. Or maybe it was just a group of folks transforming people into ghosts. History. Hey, can a dream with a hole in it float? How much better would we really be if they never invented boats? Would we kill like we kill if they never showed us the ropes? Am I walking around the wrong tree? Saw them and saw the wrong me. But I got the faith of a mustard seed, and I must have seen that I must succeed, and I must believe that we can achieve. Cause we the people who could be the people that can see the people that can free the people. But where do I begin? Do I begin in the beginning or beginning of the end? Again. But can we fast forward to the part where we win? Prophet Muhammad, he showed us the promise, and peace be unto him. Maybe we already won. Maybe it was better when. Maybe it was better when. We was all hope dealers, we was all healers, we was all realer, disseminating God's medicine. Yeah, medicine, disseminating God's medicine. Maybe it was better when.
We were so much better then. We are so much better then. So much better when. 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 So much better than. 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 We met the silence. So much better than.
I must speak. We are better when we come to the realization that there is a spirit in us, working through us, that is older than earth and greater than everlasting. We are better when we find our rhythm in jazz riffs and blue note chords. When you hear the poet spit and the artist working their magic, whether they are tagging on a wall or placing it upon a canvas, you must understand that we must learn how to speak truth to power. Even when your voice shakes, the spirit is still working in you, because you must understand that you are a child of God. You are a son of the sacred. You are a daughter of the divine. You are a nation of love. You come from a village of victory. We are better when we recognize this and understand the power that is within us. We are so much better than.
So much better when.
We are so much better than.
So much better when. So much better when.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Ashe, Hotep. Welcome everyone to our keynote presentation for our HBCU Interfaith at Work. We are so excited to have this presentation. I am so excited to welcome you to this presentation. Allow me to introduce our presenters this morning. Our first presenter that I want to introduce to you is Drea Denor. I am a fangirl of hers, and for those of you, allow me to introduce to some and to present to others, Drea Denor. For those of you who may know her music, God is My Goal, Moon Gazing, her version of Lift Every Voice and Sing, Please Don't Judge Me, You Know My Pain, You Don't Know My Pain, You Don't Know My Struggle. These are some of her amazing recordings that are just so very dear to me. She sings the experiences of so many of us. And for those of you who don't know her music, her recordings, get to know her work. Drea Denor, please welcome her. Next, we have Dr. Rami Nashashibi. Dr. Rami Nashashibi is a MacArthur Fellow, commonly known as a Genius Grant Awardee. And a Genius Grant, this is awarded to those who have shown extraordinary originality and dedication to their originality and their creative pursuits. And he is the founder and executive director of Iman. Iman is the Inner City Muslim Action Network, which he founded in 1997, better known as Iman, which provides social services to the South Side of Chicago residents. I didn't just say to the Muslims in the South Side of Chicago, to the residents of the South Side of Chicago. We're so happy to have you, Dr. Rami. And next we have Dr. Otis Moss, the pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ, and he is a regular chapel speaker. He espouses Black theology and speaks about reaching the inner city Black youth. He's a part of a new generation of ministers committed to preaching prophetically that mentions the love and justice of God, and which are inseparable companions of justice. He has a unique gift of reaching all people. And so we're so very happy to have this trio of speakers. And you may be wondering, how did I get this mix of people together on a panel of interfaith at work? So if you heard the song that we played before, I heard this on Drea Denor's new release, That's This Love Thing. And I kept thinking at the end on the song, Better When, I've heard this voice before. I go, who is this song? This one speaking, I've heard this. And I'm like, this is Dr. Moss's voice. And then the guitarist is Dr. Rami Nashashibi. I'm like, he's a MacArthur Fellow. How did he get to become a guitarist? And so they put this production together. And so I played it for Reverend Duffy and Dr. Kanika Jones. And I said, what do you all think about having them as a panel speakers for our Interfaith HBCU conference? And they thought it was an amazing idea, because when we talk about interfaith work, people think it's just so hard, it's cumbersome. How do you get people of different faiths together to work? And they did it seamlessly. And so we brought them together. And so my first question to Drea Denor, how did you make this work? How did this happen?
Thank you so much for having me. First of all, I'm so excited to be here. So Rami and we work together via Iman. I am a sacred cipher artist on the roster with Iman, and so we've been working together, I'd say, for about 4 years first, and then Rami came to me with a song idea, and he was just really sharing with me. He didn't ask me to do anything with it, but when he sent it to me, I was very, very inspired. And the way my process works is sometimes I hear lyrics and then I just begin to hear everything that would really enhance the song and take it to another level. Like I'm hearing violins in the background, I'm hearing drums, I'm hearing everything. So that's kind of how the process of creating the album began. And then when we got to Better When, like Rami just started writing one song after another. And we kind of were, I feel like we were spiritually guided, honestly, to do this work. And then Rami's like, well, what do you hear? I'm like, I think I hear a choir. He was like, yeah, I hear a choir too. He was like, well, my friend is the pastor at this church, and I had heard about him, but I didn't realize that Rami like knew him, And then he said, well, I'm gonna see if we can get the choir from that church, So then we worked with the choir. It was a incredible experience working with them. The first day we met each other, we were in the studio, and we never worked together before, and we just bonded instantly. And then next thing I know, I'm looking up, and Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III is walking through the door, and I was just like, what is happening? So yes, that's how it happened. Really, it was Rami and I talked a lot about the process and like what we heard, and then from there, Rami he reached within his circle. He didn't have to reach far at all, and he knew that if he put the call through to his friend, that it would work out. So yeah.
And so, Rami, how did you become this guitarist? I mean, you are not known for being a songwriter and a guitarist. You're known as this community activist, and working on the South Side as a community organizer. And then all of a sudden, we know you as this guitarist. And how did this happen for you? You're muted.
Now, peace and blessings. First of all, also let me express to you, Dr. Nissa, and to all of the Howard faculty and students, what a great, profound honor it is to be here with you and in discussion. Especially this institution means so much to so many, and I was just so grateful that you were the first to really hone in on this particular track of this project and have this conversation. It says a tremendous amount about you and the context of this having this conversation in the context of Howard. Means so much, especially in this moment for many of us. I've always, I think I've always messed around with different, especially guitar and percussion. So if you've ever seen us at rallies and organizing, I'll either be messing around with percussion, and over the years, artistry has always been a critical part of Iman. I mean, we've been, raised as kind of in the hip hop generation, and that opened up the doors for so many other types of artistic expression. And hip hop was ingenious because it allowed you to love yourself, to appreciate yourself, whether it was bringing in rhythms and beats and sensibilities and spiritual connectivity from across the globe. And so the ciphers that Drea mentioned that we have at our artist retreats every year, I would occasionally pick up a guitar there. I would occasionally be emboldened to sit in the corner of that cipher and just bask in the brilliance of artists like Drea, Maimuna Yusuf, and others. And it really was because of people like Drea and Maimuna that I think they helped me feel less intimidated about drawing in, to be a little more deliberate about writing songs and sharing that creative process. And I was very intimidated to send the first track to Drea. I had no idea how she would receive it. But I did know that there was something. Drea and I had already established a very deep spiritual connection. And we had already produced something together a couple years before that. And I kind of knew if there was anybody that would be able to tap into what I was trying to tap into. This is a woman raised in the church, raised around spiritual kind of expression, has a deep grounding in the Muslim context, Christian context, is just a spiritual person, and was able to be that kind of channeler, if you will, as well as a guide for me in this process. And so after she received the first song with the type of enthusiasm, it did encourage me to continue on that journey. And one song after the other finally led to, not long after our first song, we wrote Better When, and started to put all the pieces together. Part of it in Buffalo, New York, and then part of it in Chicago. I always knew that at some point, I think I joked with Reverend Moss many years earlier that at some point we were going to do a hip hop album or something together. But that's my brother. We get together, talk about hip hop, talk about things. So it was a no-brainer who I would go to and what choir we would go to. And there's so much more to say about that night we recorded, because if you would have seen Drea with that choir, it was like, first of all, the choir came together so beautifully, and there was an immediate, instant connection. I mean, between all of us in the choir, but particularly Drea was conducting, and there was just a sense of life, and it was such a sense of, we knew this was much more than a song. We had, our artists, if you can hear Amir Tubad on the horns, you hear Phenom, the MC from Chicago, that was much more it was more than one song that we were producing. We were really producing a moment that lifted up the possibility of what the beloved community can feel and look like when it comes together and puts beauty into the world.
So Dr. Moss, you are shattering barriers and boundaries, and you are crossing lines. Speak about what this moment was like for you, because it's rare that we see Christians and Muslims working together. Well, not so rare in the Black community, but rare that we see these kinds of collaborations. Speak about what this was like for you.
Well, first I want to say thank you to you, Dr. Muhammad, and to the Howard community. I have great love, as you know, for Howard University, especially the chapel and the students. And it is apropos that you all are doing this work for not only what you mean to our community, but the fact that Howard and the chapel has been this unique spiritual space where people who are all a part of the same tree, but just may sit on different branches, are always getting nourishment from the same soil. And that has been clearly communicated over the years at Howard, and big shout out to Dean Richardson. He's back there somewhere in the background listening. Mm-hmm. But it was an absolute joy to witness the chemistry between Drea and the choir was magnificent to see. I assumed that they had known each other for quite some time. I made the assumption. I was like, oh, they must have grown up together or something of that nature, because of the kind of chemistry that immediately was evident, the kind of love, friendship, cares. It was family meeting each other. And we had a wonderful intergenerational group of people. And I want to mention this to you, Drea, that our young person, Maya, was so impressed with you and the experience that she had. She is an aspiring artist and has been speaking about that moment to so many people, which was just really a beautiful thing. And she's graduating from Virginia State, and she's very excited. And I just want to say that you really had an impression on a young lady in a powerful way that she'll remember for the rest of her life. But when Rami calls, I say, where, what time? I mean, he is my brother from another mother. We always say we met as a result of hip hop. People said we need to get together and have conversation, but we started talking about hip hop. We were talking about the beauty and the creativity of a person by the name of Jay Dilla. And, I just always just have great respect for his work. And it is something that has been a part of the African-American tradition to be in conversation, to be in relationship, in partnership, and recognize the family of a variety of traditions, especially Islam. And Rami and I've had this conversation. He was so kind to allow me to speak at one of the Amanda programs. And I talked about First African Baptist Church, our oldest, quote unquote, Black religious and independent religious institution, was founded by Muslims and Christians together. I mean, you go in the church and you have the original pews. They have the names of the people who made the pews. They're in Arabic. You have on the floor in the church, which were the air holes for the Underground Railroad, you again have Arabic symbols as they were building a church that was a part of the Underground Railroad that also was a training ground for Black men to join the British Army. For those who may be confused about history, Black folk joined the British Army so they could fight against slavery. And this was one of the spaces that people did that, so that they could be free. And then now let's add another nuance to it. So you have the graveyards in and around Savannah. You have the cross on the tombstone, but the graves are everybody's oriented to facing the east. So you have all of these connections in reference to this tying between two traditions, the recognition that God is older than the sons of Abraham. God is older than the daughters of Abraham. So we've had this connection for quite some time, and so we're just living this out. We're living this moment out, and it was just a beautiful experience. I believe that the ancestors were extremely excited that we were doing what was done in 1773 when Black folk who were Christian, Muslim, and also practicing traditions that they brought over from West Africa in one space, we were doing it again.
So that's very interesting. And I think I want to talk a little bit about the lyrics and how the lyrics talk about better when. And, to talk about how our lives were better when, and looking at where we are today and looking at what does it mean to say that our lives were better when. And so, Rami, when you were writing this, what were you thinking about to say, our lives were better when?
Well, I mean, this song, again, Drea really was a guide for me in the writing. And by that, I mean, there would be moments that after a couple of songs, I would, this was new for me. A lot of it was new. I had played a little bit of guitar, but I was trying to step up my skills so I could create more of this music. But I remember that, Drea, I don't even know if we spoke about this ever yet, but I remember that moment because that song started off very dark. And I was in a dark space. We're organizers, and sometimes and I'm Palestinian, and my family, and whether it's on South Side of Chicago or whether it's West Bank, and sometimes it just I was in a dark space, and I think I often create in the middle of the night, 2, 1, 3 in the morning. Thank God Drea is typically up at that night too. So I texted her, I said, listen, I just need to, I think she encouraged me not to put filters on the first rendition of this and just write what you're feeling. Just don't filter it. And so it went through different iterations, but the first version of it was, I think, even a little darker. But I think if you notice the play on better than really was, I was going to call it better than, but there's the THAN and then there's the THEN kind of, if you will, play on words here. Part of the beginning is a more nostalgic better than, the idea that we are better back in the day, when we were not touched by these colonial savagery, when we were not subjugated. And it's a type of nostalgia that every oppressed group of people on the face of the earth have at some point, that we were better before you came and took our lands and pillaged and plundered. Yet that type of nostalgia can quickly lead to a very dark state of despair, right? And it is often like most feelings that we have, incomplete, because nostalgia is nostalgia. We construct it in different ways. It's not always a full and accurate picture of everything in historical circumstances that weren't always bright. Even our people sometimes oppressed other people, and we have to acknowledge that layers of oppression. And when we lean into our spiritual traditions, the same word for despair in Arabic is actually the same root word for the devil. Belasa, with the word for Iblis, which is literally one of the translations for Lucifer, is that his root kind of, if you will, essence is to cause despair, to put the human being in a state of despair. And so there is a type of nostalgia when you reflect so deeply on your pain and meditate on things in the past that can lead a person into a state of deep depression and despair. And I think our spiritual traditions are about pulling us to an aspirational state, to something that we are better. So then the song shifts from the more darker moments of better than to the moments of better when we can lean into, we are better when we are, and we are better than those darker moments. We are better than the oppressive forces that have been pitted against us. We are better than the kind of our worst moments. We are better than our oppressive kind of, if you will, structures that we've internalized. We are better than all of those things. And our spiritual traditions allow us to lean into that. And I think that's what the song kind of takes you onto a journey, and it transitions into that kind of moment when Drea kind of, you hear that when Drea is saying, we're better when we bring back that shine, that spiritual shine, that glow. And kind of that was the journey. And we, Phenom, if you don't know him, the reason you don't know MCs like Phenom, quite frankly, is not, because I think he could rival most commercially successful MCs in the entire country. But the reason you don't know him is he still stands on the weekends on the corners of 63rd and Halstead, or 63rd and Racine. Is that he still is mentoring hundreds of young children to explore hip hop, as a vehicle of real, genuine spiritual and mental liberation. And I think every city in the country has their phenoms, these extraordinary MCs that no one really knows about outside a certain circle. So we wanted to we knew right away we wanted to bring Phenom. I had no idea what he was going to pen, but what he wrote and how it led to this moment of, we are the people that can be the people that see the people that can free the people. The lyrics that kind of lead to this moment, this kind of liberatory feeling that kind of the song culminates in. It's also the closing song on our album. So, I just wrote the lyrics that lead up to Phenom, and then Pastor Moss did his thing, in the studio. That brother could, he got 500 sermons that he could drop at any minute. So, but we just put him in the booth and he did his thing and Drea did their thing with the chorus. So it just came together.
And so, Drea, how do you know how to put all of this together as a compilation and just make it work? How do you make this all work?
Well, I like to draw from what I know. I know a lot of people. I have a lot of friends who are educated, who can go through all the Aeolian and Dorian scales and all of this, music theories, and they can quote like all of these people. I don't know any of that. But what I do know, all I've ever had is my relationship with God, like me hearing the voice of God in my own way. And I owe my grandmother everything I have, because she introduced me to God. My grandmother, I was mostly raised by my grandmother. And I remember my grandmother waking up way before everybody in the house, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. She still has this little orange chair in her front room that she used to kneel down upon, and she would have the Bible open, and sometimes I couldn't hear any sound coming out of her mouth, but I saw her tears coming down her face, and I saw her body rocking, and I knew that she knew something that I didn't know, and I wanted to know what that was. And I used to get saved in church every Sunday when I was little, because I wanted to be as close to God as I possibly could. And I felt like, I used to hear stories about, the biblical version of, certain accounts with Moses and Noah being on these holy grounds in the mountains, and how they would have these transformative encounters with God, like the same God who said be and there is, the same God who said let there be and it was, you know, the same God who sent all the people that we follow and quote and seek to be like, you know, and follow their guidance. And so I was like, I want to hear from that God. I want to know that God. And I used to pray early. I learned to get up early and to respond to the voice that I heard early in the morning. And I was doing this since I was 6 or 7 years old. And I'm taking you through this journey because that is how God speaks to me, is through song. Like I hear melodies. You know, I'm often awakened by the sound of birds, almost every day. I don't need an alarm. I've never needed an alarm because I get up about 3 or 4 o'clock every single day. And to me, that is, I feel like it's God calling me through sound, through nature. And I follow that. I answer that call, and I try my best in this life to follow as I'm led. And so, as it relates to music and sound, my journey in music is very reflective of my spiritual journey. So, when you send me a song, like there's a lot of people that say, Drea, I wrote this song, I love for you to sing it, but if I don't feel it, I just can't. I can't do it. You know, like I'm not an inauthentic person. I can only give from from a place that is within me. And it just so happened, you know, I believe God set it up that way, that every single song that Rami shared with me, it resonated with something or some moment in my life. And every moment in my life that made me relate to those songs was a moment on a journey that just, it all goes back to just being that little girl who used to watch her grandmother and wanted to know God and wanted to hear God better. So for me, like, I hear the lyrics, I read the lyrics, and I'm sorry, as I'm reading the lyrics, I can literally see the music. I see the music before I hear the music, if that makes sense. Like how you can look at a staff and you can see little music notes on the staff. I literally can see where the sounds are going, and I work really it doesn't take me a lot of effort or time to try to like put everything together. It's just a matter of calling the people who I know have an ear like mine, and then we just kind of put it together. So I knew I heard a choir. There's something about, there's nothing like hearing Black people sing in a choir for me. Nothing like it in the world. And I often, like, I'm actually right now, I apologize for being outside, but I'm in the middle of a 902-mile journey on the Underground Railroad with 14 other people, and we just walked from Manhattan to Harlem. And so I bring that up because along the walk, you know, oftentimes we're inspired, and we remember and we imagine that our ancestors must have sang to get them through these journeys. There had to be moments on there where you sang, and we didn't have drums and we didn't have pianos back then, and you couldn't pack a trumpet with you when it was time to run. You just had to go, you know. But what we did have is the sound of the voice. And for me, you know, it really, in many religious texts, you know, when we're talking about creation happened because of the sound that God made, you know, and that sound I hear when I hear Black people singing in the choir. And so it was so important for me to hear that and to have that and to incorporate that for this song, because not only does it take me back to a sound that our ancestors made, but it also, that sound inspires us all to move forward. And that sound is what we need. I think we're going to need to tap into that, to remember that, and to recreate that and to reimagine that sound in order to move us forward.
Thank you. Dr. Moss, how did you decide what you were going to say? How did you create the words? Because those words are so powerful. How did you come up with what you were going to say?
That's a good question. I was really listening to kind of get a vibe of the song, where the song was going, what was the song stating, what was the, you know, what is the spirit of Drea and Rami and the choir, and knowing the work that they have been doing, trying to place that within that specific context. You know, Rami was like, well, just bring one of your sermons. I was like, no, I said, we're going to write something, and it's got to be it's got to be right for this. You know, it's not going to recycle anything. This is going to be specific. It's going to be specific for this. And so I wrote it as I was in the studio. In the booth. That's when it was actually written. So we had a bunch of different takes. Matter of fact, they had amazing engineers too. That were real helpful. And Rami is a great producer too. He's like, just imagine that you're a Trinity. You're a Trinity. Now don't just talk. This is not NPR. This is I said, just go on. You're talking to your people.
That is amazing. That is really, really amazing. So this was like on the fly. Dr. Moss, this was not one of your previous speeches? No. This was on the fly.
Nope.
That makes this even more amazing. That makes this even more amazing. So this was just, speaking about the work that they do, this was just, a wonderful, wonderful compilation, which really shows when we talk about interfaith at work, I'm just really so thankful for this compilation and this song. It really shows how when people who love God get together, this is what comes out of the work that can be done. I want to highlight another work that Dr. Rami has done, and it's the work that he did with Cariel Horn in terms of her situation. I'm not sure if people are familiar with Cariel Horn. Dr. Rami, can you talk a little bit about her situation?
Yeah, and again, Cariel Horn is a sister that I was introduced to by Drea, actually, and becomes a very big part of our first single that we released called Mama Please. We dedicated that video to Cariel. The song was written to connect a lot of the experiences from Palestinian kids on the West Bank to Latino kid on the border to what's happening with George Floyd, and to Black folks across the country. Yet the video we felt compelled to dedicate to Cariel, who is a Buffalo native, a mother of 5, a grandmother, I think, Drea, 10 or 11?
14.
14.
Wow.
And a beautiful, beautiful soul, an activist and organizer, and just one of a humanitarian in the finest sense of the word. You meet Cariel, you feel her spirit. She also happens to be a former police officer who 15 years earlier prevented the death of a George Floyd in Buffalo, a brother by the name of Neil Mack, who she intervened and as a young Black woman and police officer leaned in to the same kind of spiritual values that I think we're talking about that connect our experiences and that have been at the core of the Black American tradition, values that transcend any blue line, values that transcend any parochial kind of, or even denominational lines, right? I think what is so important in this larger conversation and why Otis and I have always vibed is, I think whether it's from Islam or in Christianity, when we are tapping into a spiritual impulse that transcends the kind of ways in which sometimes our religious identities get used against one another. And someone like Cariel has always drawn from that. And she drew from that in that moment to literally confront a white police officer twice her size by pulling her hand on this man and pulling physically this man's hand from Neil Mack's neck, right? And in doing so saved this man's life. And the audacity and what was so painful about the response is this man goes on to sue Cariel for assaulting her, for jumping on him. And initially the Buffalo Police Department is successful in doing that. She loses her pension. She loses her job. She is completely scapegoated and completely, tarred and tethered in the media, and her name is dragged through the dirt. And it wasn't until George Floyd's case, until her situation begins to gain energy. And it was because of artists and activists and organizers like Drea in Buffalo, who wasn't going to sit by and the self-proclaimed righteousness of the newly woke right, who get up on the pedestal and all wanted to say that they were standing with George Floyd, Drea, as an artist, as a spiritual truth teller, called it out and said, you're all a bunch of hypocrites. Why are you going to sit there and condemn and stand the killing of George Floyd when you did not stand with this woman, when she has still endured all the pain? And Drea, in that spirit, then let me know, like, you know, this was before we recorded Mama Please, that, you know, have you heard about Cariol? Rami, she'd been talking to me about her. But I had never really got the details of her case. And probably a few days after the brutal murder of George Floyd, she was talking about legal representation. And Iman had just started conversations with Dr. Intisar Rabb from Harvard Law School and Kamran Bajwa, a partner from Kirkland & Ellis, perhaps one of the most powerful private law firms in the world, about providing a legal clinic to take on both local cases of brothers and sisters going through mass incarceration, but also to take on national cases that represent kind of this symbol of what we're fighting against. And I had literally just had that conversation with them a day before. And I said, listen, because I said, we're going to find you a case in addition to these local cases that lift up kind of the larger, you know, struggle. And I had called them right after that, and we had connected Cariol with this phenomenal legal team. Ron Sullivan who's from Harvard, told Cariol, you now have the type of legal representation, the best legal representation that money cannot buy. And they fought her case. We put in petitions. We got the video placed on BT. And at the end of our video, you'll see that it, you know, very explicitly calls on people to raise awareness about Cariol Horn. She was on the Breakfast Club. She's been all over the country on every national media outlet. And on the first day of Ramadan, on the first day of our fasting, because it was getting very tough for Cariol. We told her, like, listen, we're the last mile of a marathon, but God is great, and God will reveal this victory. We knew that was coming. And on the first day of Ramadan, we got the call from Intisar. Drea was on the phone with me, and Intisar was just saying, Dr. Intisar Rabb, just saying, who is the youngest tenured professor at Harvard, by the way, also a Muslim, and a sister who's very, you know, wears hijab and known very visibly as a Muslim on campus, took on this case partly to liberate, because what her own brother had experienced, Yusuf, was wrongful incarceration. So she took on this case with that type of passion, called Drea on the first day of Ramadan, and we were put together, and the words were, we won. And so it was an important victory. And of course, it's still, we know of the pain that we deal with a day in, day out, of the ongoing challenges and the ongoing, real massive issues in front of us. But that was an important victory to celebrate.
And this is interfaith work at work. And so this is the kind of stuff that we want to be able to celebrate, to let people know that it's okay for Muslims and Christians and people who love God to work together. I mean, we don't have to announce who we are. We just have to be people who love God to work together and to serve our people. I mean, this is what it's all about. It doesn't have to be this hard thing to do. It doesn't have to be, such challenges. It just has to be people who love God, who want to work together to serve the people of God. So any closing remarks that you want to make before we bring our respondent in, Professor Grant from Howard University, any concluding remarks?
Just a 30-second point to Pastor Moss's earlier point. It is so important that the way you titled this conference was about Black and interfaith kind of connections. I think Black Americans and the Black American tradition around interfaith work was never hard, because it was always what it was, right? And that's, I think, the point. And it's why people across the globe, my people are Palestinian, what they're going through right now, have always leaned in to what the larger spiritual journey of all Black American freedom fighters have meant. And I had Maryam Ali, Muhammad Ali's eldest daughter, on my father's property in Sheikh Jarrah almost a little over a year ago. And I traveled with her across Palestine and the West Bank. Palestinians in refugee camps outside of Bethlehem. And while I was there, by the way, I called up the choir that was on that because they had asked, because they knew I was coming, and it gave me their names. I promised I would make a prayer for them outside of the Church of Nativity in Bethlehem. So I called them on FaceTime while I was there to tell them that I'm fulfilling that promise, and that literally was outside that church calling God with each and every one of their names. But it was in a refugee camp outside of Bethlehem that I was walking with Miriam, and I told them, and she looks very much like her father, and there were literally murals on the walls of the refugee camp of her father. And I said, I got to let them know, if you don't mind, who you were. And they just, the refugees, the children, the grandfathers, the young kids, just loving on her, not because her father was a phenomenal boxer, a phenomenal athlete, not because he, was one of the prettiest athletes of the modern era, and not because his discourse was so savvy and he could talk, but because he was an extraordinary, spiritual, beautiful human being rooted in the Black spiritual tradition that connected human suffering here and across the globe. And people don't need a degree in theology to understand that. They don't need a degree in kind of interfaith. They don't need modern interpretations of interfaith dialogue to understand that. They just know that. And so I just lean into what Pastor Moss has taught, helped me and others lean into, is just lean into that tradition that is so rooted here that we are beneficiaries of. People like myself, children of immigrants, are beneficiaries of the struggles of Black ancestors in this country because they modeled it. And anything that we need to confront today is to continue to tear down the way white supremacy has tried to erase and to allow us to forget that legacy. So I just thank you, Dr. Nisat, for selecting the song. Thank you for pulling me with two of my favorite people on the face of the planet at such an extraordinary institution for having this conversation.
No, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Moss?
I'm just absolutely grateful again to be a part of this conversation. And I signal and agree with my brother, Rami, is that Black spirituality has always been, how should I put it? Black spirituality has always believed in the sweet, savory taste of spiritual gumbo. We've always been tasting from a variety of spaces, places, and know that if we have the right roux, that it will be all right always. And the right roux, as Drea has already said, she stated that rooting of God, that's the roux. That's the roux that brings everything else together. Otherwise, you just got some rice and some okra. But when you got the roux, then you got some gumbo. And then everybody is happy at that moment.
It makes all the difference. Drea, last words.
I cannot believe I'm going after Dr. Reverend Otis Moss. Okay, thank you. I just want to say what's on my heart is that my prayer is that we would be better listeners. I think that God is always talking to us. And in terms of moving forward, I think that we do that best when we hold one another's hands. And before we take one step, before we start evaluating where we're going as a people, I think we have to become better listeners to God and better listeners to one another, despite what seems to be differences that we have. So that's my prayer. Let's listen better.
Thank you all so very much. Thank you all so very, 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 very much. We've had some wonderful, wonderful comments in the chat. People are just loving this conversation. People want to hear the song. And so you're going to have so many people that are going to be downloading your music. And thank you all again. Now we're going to bring in our respondent, Professor Grant from our Department of Engineering and Architecture. Professor Grant, your response. You're muted. Professor Grant, you're muted. You have to unmute yourself.
Yes, this is wonderful. How does one respond to this? It reminds me of the African American tradition of call and response. Our wonderful guest made the call, and now I'm here to try to respond to such inspirational and wonderful, what I call applied interfaith projections. They applied all these theories and concepts that we've been talking about interfaith into artistic expressions and into actual field work, actually making significant change. I'm honored to be surrounded by such distinguished folks here. So thank you for allowing me. I'm briefly going to give you my thoughts, but really they centered around two kind of areas. One is the artistic expression, or from my practice, and I've been my background is in contemplative practices of a variety of sorts, but also contemplative practices that touch on the African American experience and that touches on to the artistic experience, and that's where I want to go here. This idea of the artistic expression as a means of interfaith spirituality and artistic expression as a means of contemplation. And this has a rich history. And I think the guest has really tapped into this history of at least musical art form as a spiritual and interfaith expression. My work as an architect has to do with visual meditation and the visual artistic expression, and how that is imported into this discussion and into this idea that I find. And then how do we incorporate this idea of applied interfaith connection into the classroom? And I find our classrooms, many of our classrooms are in fact interfaith collection of students, right? They come from all backgrounds, from all faith, and we have them in the classroom. And our job as a teacher is to kind of extract all that potential that is sitting in the classroom. I won't go into how we might do that. I think our guest has probably a better idea, but one example was what we call the Black Joy Project that just recently concluded with Morehouse College, the Young Center at Morehouse College and Howard University, involving interior design students and students of history from both institutions, designing a place of contemplation, a kind of interfaith center or space of contemplation. And what does that mean? Not only conceptually, but physically. What does that mean to have that kind of place? And I think, again, our guests, if we had time, we could talk more about how they can integrate that. The second response I want to share, and then I want to end it so we can have time to repeat the song, if you will. The second response is that I've been trained as an architect. I'm trained to be a second responder, and I'm really harken back to that, especially with the devastation in Palestine and the need for second responders to go in. And this idea of the second responders, at least in my work, has to do with reflection, analysis, and safety, right? And so I see this also, this kind of movement that our three guests provided, this idea of a second response to the need to have more interfaith connections and more love. In fact, Dr. Rami, your song So Much Better reminds me that love is the center of this, right? Love is the key to this. And there's, for me, nothing better than this idea of love. So this idea of second responding, of reflection, analysis, and safety becomes really important in our spiritual journey here. I'm going to end there so we can have time, Dr. Muhammad, if it's at all possible, that we can repeat or play the song again. It's such a powerful.
I think the tech team can play the song again. And thank everyone again for all of your contributions. You are all so very special to us at Howard University. And tech team, everyone, can you cue up the music? We don't hear it yet.
Is that possible that we can repeat the song?
Yes, I'm sure they're working on it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry to put everyone on the spot, but
no, it's okay. They're working on it.
Breaking her body, drunk at their party, boys being rowdy, my hair's really cloudy. It was like 100 years ago, more like a year or so. Really don't remember though. See, we should just let it go, but they burned down our nations. Don't feel the pain that we facing, locked in their basement, just trying to make it so much better then, so much better when we were alone and we seated our own. So much better then, so much better when you sing with sages and I pen the pages. So much better then, so much better when we mending the minds and we bring back the shine.
That good old boy behavior. Never thought we would make it, even when put blood on the wager. Heaven is a mile away, but a little too far to save it. They said, prayed on a downfall, even when they got the devil as a neighbor. A neighbor? It's a neighbor. Maybe it was just a ghost, or maybe it was just a group of folks transforming people into ghosts. History. Hey, can a dream with a hole in it float? How much better would we really be if they never invented boats? Would we kill like we kill if they never showed us the ropes? Am I barking around the wrong tree? Saw them and saw the wrong me. But I got the faith of a mustard seed, and I must have seen that I must succeed, and I must believe that we can achieve. Cause we the people who could be the people that can see the people that can free the people. But where do I begin? Do I begin in the beginning or beginning of the end? Again. But can we fast forward to the part where we win? Prophet Muhammad, he showed us the promise, and peace be unto him. Maybe we already won. Maybe it was better when. Maybe it was better when. We was all hope dealers, we was all healers, we was all realer, disseminating God's medicine. Yeah, medicine, disseminating God's medicine. Maybe it was better when.
We were so much better then. We are so much better then. Spending our lives there to bring back the time. So much better when. 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 So much better than. So much better than. So much better than. So much better.
So much better than. So much better than. We met the silence. So much better than.
I must speak. We are better when we come to the realization that there is a spirit in us, working through us, that is older than earth and greater than everlasting. We are better when we find our rhythm in jazz riffs and blue note chords. When you hear the poet spit and the artist working their magic, whether they are tagging on a wall or placing it upon a canvas, you must understand that we must learn how to speak truth to power. Even when your voice shakes, the spirit is still working in you, because you must understand that you are a child of God. You are a son of the sacred. You are a daughter of the divine. You are a nation of love. You come from a village of victory. We are better when we recognize this and understand the power that is within us. We are so much better than.
So much better than.
We are so much better than.
So much better than. So much better than.